I work as an investment banker. After 35 years of hard work and making enough money, I quit my job. I wanted to live a very private life outside the cities. I did not have any kids or a wife, so I had no other commitments. I bought a house near the woods in West Virginia. It was a great house, although not very big. It had all the amenities I needed and a main road nearby for traveling around. I got it for a very cheap price. At first I was a little skeptical. But the previous owner told me since this is a little remote, it's hard to sell. It was a good enough answer to convince me. I loved it there. The clean air, the beautiful scenery, the picturesque lake nearby where I sometimes went for a dip. It was perfect, only for a couple of months though. One day in the afternoon while I was lying on the sofa watching TV, the atmosphere around me suddenly got very quiet. Usually it's birds chirping throughout the entire day, but now it was dead silent. I got up and looked out the window, but there was nothing I could see. There are bears and coyotes around, but that never stopped them from chirping before. It was a little weird, but I did not know much about birds, so I just let it go. Later that evening, I went for a dip in the lake. While I was coming back again, the birds suddenly stopped chirping. But this time, it felt different. I felt like I was being watched. My instincts were telling me to immediately get back inside. My house wasn't that far, so I quickly sprinted to my house and locked the door, and opened the curtains slightly to see what was outside. Absolutely nothing was there. I was wondering whether being this far away from civilization was making me paranoid, but that couldn't be it. I was truly enjoying myself. I peeked outside the window for some time and saw nothing, so I left it at that. But just for precautions, I would not go towards the lake for some time, and have my rifle with me when I do decide to venture out. The next day when I woke up, I saw a lot of mud on the front of my porch and huge animal prints. But it was a very peculiar shape. It was just one huge, elongated oval. Which animal was this? I even noticed a few scratch marks on the side of my house, a few small ones and few huge ones. What was going on? I had no idea. I had wires attached to bells in case any animal comes into my property. An animal this size would have triggered the alarm. I called a few of my friends who are into hunting. They first thought I was joking around, but after listening to my tone, they understood I was serious. They weren't sure as well which animal it was. Maybe it was someone playing a prank, but that wouldn't explain the scratch marks. I was very cautious from that day onwards. Never went into the woods. I even installed cameras near my front door. After that first incident, I did not see its footprints in my property for some time. It was as though it knew that I had cameras set up. But for how long could I be a prisoner in my own house? I decided that I was going to hunt this animal. I wasn't a hunter at all, so I was only going to look out for it from inside my house and not go outside looking for it. A few days passed and nothing happened, until one night when suddenly everything went quiet. I took my gun and ran towards the window and opened it slightly so I could see around and aim for it. I looked around for it but could see nothing. Until I saw walk across this huge beast that walked around like a gorilla but had long legs. Its eyes shined green. What was this animal I was seeing, as it was walking back into the forest? I remembered that I had to shoot it. I took aim and fired a few rounds. I heard a weird shrill, which I associated that it came from the beast. I did not go outside immediately as I was still scared in case it was alive and I had missed. The next morning, I went to look around to see its body. But I found nothing. No body, no blood, nothing. Only those long oval footprints. I wasn't the best marksman, but no way all those shots missed. I did not even find a trace of the bullets anywhere. This house became like a cage. It showed up often, and I would try to shoot it, but to no avail. After a few weeks, I decided it wasn't worth it. Even if I killed this one, it does not guarantee that there aren't more. It seemed like a very smart creature dodging the wires and avoiding the cameras somehow. I made the choice to leave the house. I was financially well enough that I could do it. I packed my things and left. I tried to sell the house but haven't been successful. Now I know how I got it for so cheap. I am a single mom with a special needs child who was 9 years old at the time. My husband passed away when Roy, my son, was just 7 years old. We had a small house with 2 bedrooms in Florida. I worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. I would be back from all my work around 9 p.m. and Roy would come back from school at 4 p.m. He stayed alone most of the time. I asked the neighbors to come check on him a few times. They had no interest, but they still agreed. I would prepare all the meals beforehand so Roy would have no problem. One day, while I was leaving the house, my neighbor approached me and told me that Roy kept spooking her with stories of his imaginary friends and how the friends hated that she was coming over to check on him. I apologized to her and explained that Roy has a lot of difficulty communicating, and maybe he was just trying to make a joke or strike a conversation with you. She told me that she understood that, but if it ever happened again, she wouldn't come over to check on him. I apologized again and told her that I would talk to him. Once I got back from work, I spoke with Roy. I told him not to speak about his imaginary friends to the neighbors. He started crying and telling me that he wasn't lying and they aren't imaginary. I consoled him and told him that regardless of whether it's real, he shouldn't tell the neighbors all this, and he agreed. I act as though I don't believe the imaginary friends story, but I do, and I have had encounters with them. Things around the house keep moving around, rooms suddenly become very chill, doors randomly bang shut even though there is no wind flow, and a lot of odd occurrences. At first I thought it was my husband who was around us until one day when I was drying the clothes, and I saw 5 boys down the hallway looking at me with a frown. I said, "Hello? Who are you guys?" Then they slowly started walking towards the TV room where Roy was. I ran towards them and saw they all had vanished, and Roy was watching TV. I asked Roy whether he just saw someone here, and he said yes. His friends were just here a few seconds ago. I did not understand what was going on. These things weren't here before. What happened now? I did not even have enough money to move out. I spoke to the church pastor, and they refused to help since we weren't regulars. I convinced myself that these spirits weren't causing any harm, so it would be just fine. Everything was fine for a year. After Roy had turned 10, I started noticing bruises on his arm. I asked him about it, and he had no clue about it. I asked his teachers whether someone has been bullying Roy, and she said no. Everything was fine. In fact, he was really intelligent, and everyone liked him. One night after watching TV, I was winding up to go to sleep. I went to Roy's room just to make sure he had his blanket on. When I went to his room, to my horror, I saw this small boy holding Roy's hand and biting it. The boy slowly turned his head and looked at me and jumped. I fell to the floor, and when I opened my eyes, it had vanished. And when I checked Roy's arm, there was a fresh bruise. These spirits had started to get aggressive, and I started seeing them more often. They would randomly kick the back of my knee or pull my hair when I was sleeping. I had enough. I couldn't bear more of this nor let my son take this. I decided to sell this house and get a much smaller house elsewhere. It would be inconvenient and difficult, but I had to. When we moved into our much smaller new house, I was still scared that they would be followed here as well. But thankfully, we were left alone. When I was in high school, there used to be this guy who always kept following me. He asked me out a few times, but I always told him no since he had a negative reputation with others. He always creeped me out, and the way he looked at me seemed sinister. He always tried to find me in moments where I did not have anyone near me, and he would ask me out repeatedly even after I said no. He would hold my wrist tightly and plead with me. With difficulty, I got his grip loose and ran. But one day, things went from bad to worse. After gym class, while I was in the changing room taking a shower, I heard commotion outside. This guy had come even there to look for me. The other girls yelled at him, and listening to all this, even the authorities intervened and took him out. Later, after this issue got escalated, he got suspended for 2 weeks. I was relieved. Finally, I would have some peace. The next day, when I was at the mall with my friends, I had this unnerving feeling I was being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder to see if anyone was looking, but saw no one. My friends assured me that if anything went down, they were there to support and told me to relax and enjoy the day. I agreed. Maybe I was being too paranoid about it. After shopping, we went to the basement where the parking lot was. I again had this unnerving feeling that someone was looking at me, and when I turned to look, I saw this dark figure standing next to one of the pillars. I wasn't able to make out who it was since they were wearing a black hoodie. I subtly told my friends that someone was looking at me, and when they turned to see, that person had vanished. They told me not to worry and that they would drop me back home. I smiled and thanked them. I reached back home and went into my room. I had got some new clothes and bathroom supplies. I laid them on the chair next to the bed. I thought to myself while lying on the bed whether I actually saw someone in that basement, or was it my anxiety that was getting to me. I decided to take a bath to unwind. While lying in the tub, I heard noises coming from my room. I thought it was my mom just clearing my room. I asked her if she could pass me the shampoo that was lying on the bed. The door opened slightly and the bottle came flying through and into the tub. I was a little startled. I thought maybe Mom was pissed off at me or something. After changing and everything, I went down for dinner. I asked my mom if she was upset with me or anything, and she was puzzled and said no. I then asked my sister whether it was her, and she said no as well, but knowing my sister, I was sure it was her. I left it at that and ate my dinner. When I went back to my room, I noticed that my window was open. I usually always have it closed. It was odd, but I was too tired to stress about it. I turned the light off and laid on the bed and went to sleep. After some time while sleeping, I felt as though someone was breathing on me. I woke up and to my absolute horror, there was someone right beside me staring at me. I screamed and threw the blanket on the person. My family came running and turned the lights on. My dad saw another guy in the room and immediately knocked them out, and we called the police. It was the same guy from school who was stalking me and broke into my house. The cops promptly came and arrested him, and he was soon expelled from school. Even now, I still remember that day and am still terrified.